Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Story Cafe this evening. When all the world is a hopeless jumble and the raindrops tumble all around, heaven opens a magic lane. When all the clouds darken up the skyway, there's a rainbow highway to be found, leading from your window pane to a place behind the sun, just a step beyond the rain. Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anne Cowling, and I am your host for tonight. And that was the wonderful Doreen Vanderstoop singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow. I would like to welcome you to the Story Cafe, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, stories of hope and transformation. And just as a housekeeping note, we would be grateful if you could remain muted until the end of the cafe, when there will be an opportunity for you to show your appreciation, we hope. And in any event, join in the show. Thank you. We are performing from Calgary, Alberta, which is Treaty 7 land. Before we start, Chantal Chagnon will give us a land acknowledgement and a traditional Cree welcome song. Chantal?
Thank you, Anne. Tansei, Oki, Bonjour, hello. My name is Chantal Chagnon. I am Cree, Anishinaabe, and Métis from Muskeg Lake Cree Nation in Saskatchewan, which is in Treaty 6 territory. But tonight I would like to welcome you to the land upon which we stand, Treaty 7 territory. Calgary was also known as Mohkinstsis, which literally means elbow in Blackfoot. It was a place to bring people together, to gather, to share stories, to share community, to share in ceremony and food and trade. And the spirit of Mohkinstsis is still alive and well today when we see events like this where we're able to share our stories in a meaningful way. To welcome everybody into the circle today, I wanted to acknowledge the people who were here before us, the Blackfoot of Siksika, Kainai, and Pagani, the people of Sarsidene, which are Tsutsina, and the Stoney Nakoda from Morley, which includes Chiniki, Bears Paw, and Wesley First Nations. We're also walking in the footsteps of Métis Region 3, which is why I proudly wear my Métis sash, to act as that bridge between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. When we acknowledge the land, we're actually acknowledging far more than that. We're acknowledging the relationships that we have to each other and to the land. We're acknowledging the responsibility that we have to learn from our past through our stories and share those stories with our future generations. And so I would like to share with you the Cree Welcome Song. Traditionally, when we sing songs, we sing in rounds of 4 to honor the 4 directions of the medicine wheel. But this song is a little bit different. We actually sing it in rounds of 3, and that's to keep the circle open and welcoming so everyone completes the circle tonight. Because in a circle, we're all connected. There's no beginning, there's no end. No one is greater or less than anyone else in the circle, just like in the Hoop of Life. So it teaches us to honor each other for those differences. Because if everybody was exactly the same, the world would be incredibly boring and nothing would ever get done. So we need those differences to make all of our community work, to be able to thrive and be resilient together. Mia Sin, which is the Cree welcome song, is from the Natahau family from Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation, which is on the border of Saskatchewan and Alberta. And so I honor that family whenever I share this song. Miasin doesn't just mean welcome. It also means beautiful. Miasin, miasin, hasemina, hasemina, epetakote, niwagomagan, hota, homa, kitaskino, miasin, miasen, hasemina, hasemina, epetakote, niwagomagan, hota, homa, kitaskino, miasin, miasen, hasemina, hasemina, epetakote, niwagomagan, hota, homa, kitaskino. Hi, and welcome to the circle today, everyone. Miigwech.
Thank you so much, Chantal. As I mentioned, my name is Anne Cowling, and I'm a storyteller with Storytelling Alberta. We practice the art of oral storytelling, which means not written. We're a charitable organization with a mission to spread story in whatever way possible, including with story cafes like this one. These have been tough times. The time of the COVID pandemic has been a period of uncertainty, adjustment, and sorrow. It has also been a time of gratitude, caring, and new discoveries along the way. One of the new discoveries has been the importance of hope in our lives. Hope doesn't solve our problems, but it does in many ways give us the feeling that there is a way out of whatever difficulty is facing us. It allows us to contemplate the future, but still be okay in the present. Tonight, then, we will tell the story of hope with stories. Our tellers will take us on a journey beginning as a starting point with our true and essential selves. Then we will reach out into the unknown, blocking out the naysayers, overcoming adversaries, and, as always, carried forward on the wings of hope. Our final stories will be ones of transformation as we complete the circle back to the beginning of creation. Our first teller tonight is Wendy Edey, who is joining us from Edmonton. Wendy is a counseling psychologist and is also known as the Hope Lady. Her teachings from 2 workshops have been the inspiration for this cafe. And thank you so much, Wendy. She will start us on this journey with the Sufi tale, the stream and the desert. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Wendy Edey.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you, Anne. Tonight, I want to tell you about a stream. This particular stream started its journey at the top of a high mountain. Then it rambled around rocks and it crashed over waterfalls. It fondled its way through forests and meandered in meadows. It roamed around hills and then vaulted into green valleys until, surprisingly, it came to the edge of a very large desert. The stream tried to continue on, but every time it put water into the sand, the water disappeared. The stream was confused. "I don't know what to do," said the stream. "I keep trying to go forward and my water's disappearing." And then the stream heard a voice whispering like the sand of the desert. And the voice said, "Stream, what seems to be the trouble?" "Well," said the stream, I think I'm on the right path. I seem to be on the right journey, but here I am at the edge of this desert, and every time I try to go forward, I lose my water into the sand. I don't know what to do." "Well," said the voice, "perhaps you ought to just try running yourself into the desert. Maybe you'll become a marsh. Maybe things will grow." "Oh, no," said the stream. "If I do that, I will disappear for sure. I'm so confused. I'm sure I'm on the right path. I don't know what to do." "Well," said the sand, "you've always got options, you know. The wind blows a lot around here. Maybe you should ask the wind to carry you across this desert." "Oh, no," said the stream. "I can't be picked up by the wind. I'm a stream. See, I've got water and I'm running, and that's not going to work for me at all." "Well," said the voice, "then I guess maybe you'll just have to wait until you think of something else." And so the stream waited. "Maybe," said the sand, "maybe it's just that you've forgotten your true and essential self." "Oh, for heaven's sake," said the stream, "look at me. You can see I'm water." And the stream kept on waiting, waiting and waiting. And perhaps she drifted off to sleep because soon, almost as in a dream, she kind of had a distant memory in which the wind scooped her up and started to lift her in the air. And then it was happening, and the wind lifted the stream into the air and flew higher and higher, far and far across the desert, up and up, until the stream was a cloud near the top of a high mountain. And then the wind deposited the stream at the top of the high mountain. And again, for a while, the stream rambled around rocks and rushed over waterfalls, and it went through meadows and across forests and around hills and into green valleys. And for that time, the stream remembered its true and essential self. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wendy.
Thank you.
Have you ever met a hope sucker? You know the sort. "We've always done it this way. That'll cost too much. You can't do that." I know that my biggest hope sucker is myself. Here is Wendy again with the fun story, The Blind Men and the Blind Elephants. Wendy?
Thanks again, Anne. I'm particularly sensitive about this story because I myself am a blind person, and so when I first heard the story, I didn't know what to make of it, or at least the first part of the story anyway, which may be familiar to many of you. One time there were 6 blind men, and they wanted to discover what an elephant was like. So they went up to the elephant, and each of them took up a position somewhere around the elephant and conducted an examination of whatever he could reach. And the first one said, well, he felt the elephant's leg, tall and sturdy. And he said, well, surprising, an elephant is like a tree. Now, the second man was actually touching the whole big, broad side of the elephant. And he said, a tree? I think not. This is very large here and flat. I think an elephant is like a wall. Now, a third and very surprised person actually was examining one of the tusks, examining its curve, its point, its hardness. He said, well, really, I don't know what you people are talking about. Really, as far as I can tell, an elephant is like a spear. A fourth was examining the trunk, the curve of it, the length of it. An elephant, he said, is undoubtedly like a snake. The fifth man was touching the elephant's ear, examining its curve, its folds, and he declared, an elephant is like a fan. Now there was only one man left, and he got the tail end of the elephant. Examining the tail, he said, well, there's only one conclusion to reach here. An elephant is like a rope. Well, my goodness, these men began to argue and fight. And in a better world, they might have realized that their differences were great enough that they must be thinking of different parts, and they might have got together to try to figure something out. But this is not what happened. They continued to argue and fight. It's like a tree. No, you idiot. A wall. No, you idiot. It's like a fan. No, a snake. Oh, it's not a snake. It's a rope. Oh, for heaven's sakes, a spear. And on and on and on it went. This great argument in the forest. For all I know, they might be arguing still because it was getting absolutely nowhere. Now, not too far away, it turns out that there were 6 blind elephants. And you know, elephants, they're known to be very intelligent. And so the elephants were discussing what a man is like. And none of them, of course, had ever seen a man, so they did not know. When they heard a very unfamiliar sound, they heard the sound of something moving, and it seemed like it was walking on only 2 feet. They couldn't hear the walking of 4 feet at all. Well, they began to wonder what it was, and so the president of the elephants said, "Excuse me, but what are you?" And the creature with the 2 feet said, "Oh, I'm a man." Well, the elephants were overjoyed, and they decided that they should undertake a thorough examination to discover the nature of a man. And so the president of the elephants took his very, very large hoofs and gave the man a thorough and complete examination, after which he concluded, an elephant is flat. And after that, each of his fellow elephants made a similar examination and confirmed it, and they all agreed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Hopesuckers can definitely leave you flat. Now, I'd like to tell you the story of Eric Van Meyer, the man who defeated the Hopesuckers. Eric Van Meyer was born in 1968 in Princeton, New Jersey. He was the youngest of 4 children, and when he was just a little tiny baby, his parents noticed that there was something rather strange about the way his eyes were working. They seemed to be flickering around and doing strange things. That ended up with a 2 or 3 year odyssey from one specialist to another, all of which had different opinions, just like the men in Wendy's story. Finally, they ended up at a world-renowned clinic in Boston, Massachusetts. And there they received the diagnosis. Eric had a dysfunction of the retinas called retinochiosis, which meant that his retinas had already separated from his, detached themselves from his eyes, and he only had peripheral vision, even though he was unusually young for this to happen. He would be able to see for a while until his early teens, and then his retinas would split apart because of the pressure in his eyeballs, and then he would lose his vision altogether. Well, this was a hard diagnosis to take. The family went home, and his mother, who was a very determined person, immediately set the house into organization. She set up systems for Eric so that he could find his way around and do the things he needed to do. When he was 4 years old, he was given a pair of what he called bottle glasses, which were 1/4 inch thick glasses, and he could read a printed word if he held the paper right up to his face. When he was 8, he was given a monocular, and he was able to see vision at a distance, and also, to his joy, join his family in movies and be able to watch the action, which was a total revelation for him. When he was 12, he sort of noticed that his vision seemed to be not as good. For a while, he told himself that maybe the sun was too bright, or maybe it was too dark, or maybe the air was dry. But eventually he had to say, he had to tell himself that his vision was really not as good as it had been. In his year of being 13, it was a terrible year. His retinas split into several pieces, and he had multiple images, of which only one was right. And that led to some bad accidents. He once fell off a dock by following the wrong image. At the age of 14, he'd lost his vision altogether, so the prophecy had come true. Now, I don't know if you remember being 14, but it's a very critical time for anyone, especially a young guy who wants to be cool. He did not want to be in the present. He wanted to be back in the past, shooting baskets with his friends and bombing around on his bicycle and having fun. Not only that, in Connecticut, where they lived, it's the first year of high school, as you might know, and he was now in a new school where there were people who had not known him when he still had sight. He did not want to be a blind dork with a white cane and a sheaf of braille under his arm, and he resisted every effort to help him adjust to his new situation. It was hard to know what changed things for Eric, but a few things started going right. One was that he started to find a love for language, the beauty of words, and he realized it was only his fumbling with braille that prevented him from seeing those wonderful words on the page. He also realized, although he might fumble a bit in daylight with his white cane, at nighttime, when he was bombing through the woods with his friends, he ran faster and better than his friends who were stumbling about in the dark. Then came the time for him to sign up for sports, and he realized suddenly, to his surprise, that he now had an opportunities he hadn't had before. Oh yes, team sports were out, but he'd never been able to do contact sports while he still had vision, because he might impair the vision that he got. Now he had no vision. He could go right ahead. So what was there out there? Wrestling. Wrestling. A blind kid wrestling. So he signed up. And then he found he was very good at wrestling. He was a tough, wiry guy, not too big at the start. But that first day, he was able to hold off a pin from the team captain twice as long as any of the other newbies on the team. He found he had, in his short time of having no vision, he had developed skills that sighted kids didn't have. For instance, he could hear the opponent moving around on the mat, and he could anticipate what strategy they were just about to use and catch them by surprise. Then he also could tell from a handshake the fitness level of his opponent. And if it was a soft handshake, he would listen to hear them tiring, and he would know to press his advantage. After a month or two, the first meet came up, and at the last minute, Eric was substituted when one of the senior wrestlers was injured. The coach said later that he felt that he was feeding him to the sharks. But Eric won his bout and brought the house down. It was wonderful. And over the years, Eric became the team captain. And eventually, he and the team went off to represent their state at the national championships. So life went on for a bit. After about a year and a half, Eric went off to a blind skills training camp in near Boston, Massachusetts. It was a summer camp, a month-long summer camp. And amongst the many activities offered was climbing. Blind kids climbing. But everyone was doing it. So Eric signed up. And that day, all of them made it to the top of the cliff face. Eric found he had skills that possibly sighted people didn't have. He was good at reading the rock and anticipating when a crack had disappeared and that it could reappear later on. He was a natural. Then there was the thrill of making it to the top of the cliff. Wow, that was a buzz. And he was hooked. Well, I'll fast forward through the next bit. Life went on. He graduated from high school. He went to Boston College for university. He still had his love of language. He got a double major in English and communications. He also had a master's in education. He now had a guide dog called Wizard, and he was pretty independent. Then he encountered his first real hope suckers. Oh yes, he'd had bullies in his past in grade school. There'd also been hope suckers when he was just starting at school. He'd gone into regular school, but his mother had a fight and she won. But now Eric was looking for a job, and he would go off to interviews at the school, and immediately he knew who was in the room. Their voices would drop and they would say, "How do you think you're going to do this? And what about that?" He had all the answers. He had plenty of experience after a while, but he knew that there'd already been a line through his name. So, and they would seize his elbow and lead him out, not asking if he needed any help, with his guide dog trailing behind him. But 5 schools believed in him, and he had 5 job offers. He chose to go to Phoenix just because it was a different part of the US. And I could say a lot about his time at his school at Phoenix teaching grade 5, but there was also something else. He was now close to the mountains and he could get back to his passion for climbing. He found a couple of friends and they became weekend climbers, tackling more and more difficult peaks. Until, and Eric, he wanted to be an equal part of the team. So if there was something that he wasn't able to handle on a climb, he would work on it the next day. For instance, how do you set up your own tent on the side of Mount Rainier when it's -20 centigrade, there's a gale force wind blowing, and your hands, which are your eyes, are encased in down mitts? The next day found him outside his school in 30-degree weather in a tank top and down mitts, putting up and taking down his tent, putting it up and taking it down, until he knew that tent inside out. In 1995, the team decided to climb Mount Rainier, Denali, the first of the 7 summits. And the next 6 years, he climbed more of the 7 summits. 2001, he climbed Mount Everest. In 2002, he climbed the last of the 7 summits. And in 2008, just to make sure, he climbed Mount Carstens in Indonesia, which at 16,000 feet is a more demanding configuration of the 7 summits. Already he was becoming known as an inspirational, motivational speaker ever since Denali, which had been funded by the American Institute for the Blind, Foundation for the Blind. There'd been a film made, and that had certainly gave him a lot of notice from the media. In 2005, he founded the organization No Barriers with the tagline, "Whatever is within you is stronger than whatever is in your way." And I could talk a lot more about what No Barriers does. It's to help people facing challenges of whatever kind in their lives, like climbers who've fallen and become paraplegics. He led a group of blind climbers on a mountaineering expedition in Tibet. But where does this story end? He's had more and more adventures, but the story ends with today, with Eric, who is now able to contemplate the future, whatever challenges lie ahead, and is okay about the present. And sometimes that can be a challenge even greater than climbing Mount Everest. Thank you. So I'll just pause to reflect because I now have to carry on. And of course, with any story in real life, you can never know all the answers. Sometimes we're taken by surprise, as Eric did, and sometimes with a little bit of luck. Our next teller is Gordon Churchill. Now, Gordon Churchill is a storyteller, a woodworker, and an artist. He will give you the Yiddish story, which is called Wisdom versus Luck. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Gordon.
Thank you so much. I am always fascinated when I get introduced to see what kind of things they're going to say about me and then what I have to live up to. So thanks so much, Anne. I was given this story by Anne, who asked me to tell it. And so I felt a little bit uneasy about it because I'm aware of the whole discussion around cultural appropriation. And this is a Yiddish story, and I don't have a Yiddish bone in my body. So I decided that I would do a little bit of introduction to the story, which might set it up a little better for you to understand what I'm saying. There was a Yiddish organization in Vilna in the late 1800s who decided that there was a rich and deep cultural heritage of the Yiddish community across Eastern Europe. And so as people were going out into all of the villages and towns, doing business and doing all the other things that they did as they traveled, they were also charged with being curators of cultural artifacts. And they were asked to write down if they heard a story or they heard a song or someone made an aphorism or a wise saying or they heard something profound in the local synagogue and send it back to Vilna. And over a period of about 50, 60 years, the Yiddish organization in Vilna collected everything. But in 1940, when the Nazis took Eastern Europe, Vilna, of course, fell under the Nazis, and the collection was evaluated by the Nazi regime. Some of it was burned, and the rest of it was preserved as discussion of, quote unquote, the Jewish problem. In 1945, the Americans liberated that part of the world, and they took the entire collection, boxed it up, and sent it to a Yiddish organization in New York City. When it arrived, they found that there were 50,000 bound volumes and 30,000 cultural artifact files. Those were all unpacked and began to be sorted through. And an author working for Pantheon Press sat down and looked at the entire collection and picked out a number of stories that were then published in a book called Yiddish Stories. And this one, Wisdom or Luck, comes from that collection. It seems that wisdom and luck were both walking down the same road on the same day. And as they were walking together, they fell into a discussion as to which of them was greater. Wisdom said, well, I have the ability to form and shape all knowledge and all culture. Nothing would happen without me. Ah, Luck said, that may be so, but takes you a long time. What I do happens in seconds. And so the debate went and went back and forth and back and forth. And about the same time that they were having this debate, a boy was being born in a poor village to a single mother, a child with no advantages in life. And the two of them decided that they would make this boy an experiment. One of them would enter into his life and see what could be done. Wisdom said, I'm in for the long haul, so why don't I go first? Luck said, go ahead. So Wisdom entered into the boy's life, and about 15 years of age, he managed to get an apprenticeship with a goldsmith. The goldsmith quickly realized that this boy was brilliant. He not only learned everything that the goldsmith knew, but he began to invent some things on his own and make things the goldsmith had never seen. The goldsmith was delighted with him. But the boy realized at the end of the year that he knew everything that the goldsmith knew, and there was no challenge left. And so he went to the goldsmith and he said, I would like to leave and go somewhere where I can learn more. And the goldsmith was very sad about that. And he didn't want to lose this fellow because he was his best employee. But he knew that if he didn't let him go, the boy would become bored and he'd lose him anyway. And so he said, sadly, go ahead. Well, the boy went to the capital city of the region, and there he got himself another apprenticeship, this time not with a goldsmith, but with a tailor. And this tailor was a very influential man who had contracts for the robes and all of the clothing for the court of the king in that city. The boy began to work, and very soon the tailor realized that this boy's ability was superior. He was turning out garments that no one had ever seen before or even dreamed of. So the tailor supplied these to the court, and when the king sat down upon his throne and looked at all of the people in court, so beautifully dressed and robed, he said, "Where's all this coming from?" He said to the tailor, "How have you come up with all these new clothes?" And the tailor said, "Well, I take my responsibility to the court very seriously, and I have been staying up nights thinking about things, and of course I wanted to do the very best job I could, so I supplied my very best." Oh, the king was very pleased and amply rewarded the tailor, who did not pass any of that back on to his apprentice. He kept it all for himself. Now, about this time, the king had a daughter, and this daughter was brilliant, sharp as a tack, and she was coming of marriageable age. Well, what do you do with her? How do you get her? How do you choose someone for her? How does she choose? Well, the daughter solved the problem. She said, "Father, we'll have a contest. Any man that can make me talk, I will marry. But just to clean out the riffraff. Anybody who doesn't make me talk, take off his head." Boom. The father said, "Well, as you wish." Now, there were many young men in that city who thought, it can't be that hard to make a girl talk. I can do that. And besides, she was ravishingly beautiful. So many young men tried, and many families lost a son. Well, our apprentice to the tailor heard about this, and he said, "What have I got to lose? I'm never going anywhere working for this tailor. I will always be poor. I might as well try." So he gave his notice to the palace that he wished to speak with the princess and see if he could make her talk. Now, the king had appointed that there would be observers in the room to witness if anybody made the princess talk. But all of those observers had seen so many young men come and go. And they'd been so saddened, you might almost say post-traumatic stress, that they didn't even bother watching anymore. The young man walked into the room where the princess was, and he did not engage with the princess at all. He looked around the room and, oh, there in the middle of the table was the most beautiful candelabra. And he walked over to it and he said, "Oh, candelabra, I'm so glad that you're here. I'm sure that you've sat on this table for many wise discussions and you can give me profound advice. I have a problem that I cannot decide, so I will tell you my problem, and then I would really appreciate your guidance. You see, there were three men. One was a wood carver, one was a tailor, and one was a teacher. And between the three of them, they got into an argument one night at the pub as to which of them was the greatest. And there wasn't that much work for them in the village anyway. And so they decided that as there wasn't that much work, they would go on a journey and they would take an experiment to see which of them was greater. And so they set out. Now, on their first night out, they were in the middle of the dark and dreary forest, a place where you didn't want all three of you asleep at the same time. Something just might happen. And so they decided that they would take shifts. The first to go was the woodcarver. The other two laid down and went to sleep, and the woodcarver looked around and evaluated the different pieces of wood and found a nice piece of log and set it up and got out his hammer and his chisels and he began to work on it. And within about 2 hours, he had the most beautiful woman carved, but she was naked. And when he was done, he woke up the tailor and he went off to sleep. And the tailor, seeing this gorgeously beautiful but naked woman, said, well, we must provide her clothes. I can make her beautiful. And so he got out his needles and his threads and his yards of cloth, and he made the most beautiful, exquisite clothing for her and a hat. At the end of his 2 hours, he lay down, and then the teacher got up. Well, here was this beautifully well-dressed, engaging young woman, but she wouldn't talk to him. And he thought, I'm a teacher. I know what I can do about this. And so he used all of his skill and all of his ability, and he engaged her in conversation. He got her talking. And the other two woke up, and there they were, engaged in conversation. And then the three of them fell into an argument. Well, obviously, I made her. She's beautiful. Ah, but I made her more beautiful. That's me. And then the teacher said, but I taught her how to speak, how to communicate, how to express herself. Candelabra, which of these three do you think is greater? And the princess, who had been listening this whole time, stepped in and said, well, it seems to me that the one that could make her talk was obviously the wisest and the best of the lot. And then she realized he had made her talk. So she went off to find her father, and he suggested that she get herself dressed for the nuptials. And the servants who hadn't been listening thought that the young man, in fact, hadn't done anything. So they picked him up, one arm on each side, and they took him out and they set him in front of the executioner. And the executioner picked up his sword and he was about to swing it at the young man. And luck said to wisdom, hey, what you got? Wisdom said, I got nothing. Would you like me to try? Knock yourself out, he said. Well, luck just stepped into the picture. And didn't the young woman at that moment just step out of her apartment and see the executioner with his sword up, and she yelled, wait, why are you killing the man I want to marry? Well, the king was aghast. And he made sure that the wedding happened, and he made sure that the poor servants also lost their heads for not being careful of his daughter and her husband. So, you might say on the basis of this, yeah, wisdom is great. This young man had had nothing in life if it hadn't been for wisdom. On the other hand, he wouldn't have kept his head if it hadn't been for a little luck. And on the one hand, you might say, well, there wouldn't have been a collection of stories at all if some wise people in Vilna hadn't sent out curators all over the Ukraine. On the other hand, isn't it lucky that the Germans didn't burn that story? Nah. Maybe on the other hand, life is better when you have a little wisdom and a little luck.
Thank you so much, Gordon. That was absolutely fantastic. Yes, indeed, luck can help no end. And did I mention surprise? Yes. In any challenge, there can always be things you don't know about that can help you along the way. Wendy will now give us a little story called Smoker's Defeat. Wendy?
Well, thank you. And you must all have noticed already that this particular cafe has been managed extremely expertly. And this is due to the management skill of both Anne and Doreen Vanderstoop, who manages the technical part of the Zoom of this thing. And I have a great admiration for managers because I once was a middle manager myself. And you know, a middle manager has a certain degree of stress always because you're in the middle, you're accountable to the people above you, and you probably can't accomplish much without the cooperation of the people below you. And you're always in a bit of competition with the people who are alongside of you. Oh, it's not easy being a middle manager. But I was a fairly popular middle manager. I was rather easy to get along with, if I do say so myself. This was back in the 1980s when things were changing a bit. And my friend Liz, my colleague Liz, used to describe me flatteringly in many terms. And one of the things she used to say about me is that she would say, Wendy is a tolerant non-smoker. And this is what she meant. She meant that, well, if we were, say we were on a business trip together, me and my colleagues, including her, and there were smokers along, which there definitely was if there was Liz, then I would choose to sit in the smoking section on the airplane, just to be with them. And you know, I didn't, when smoke bothered my throat, you know, and it bothered my eyes too, but even so, just for the pleasure of being with them on the trip, I would sit there. And suppose we went out for lunch to a restaurant and we had the choice of sitting in the smoking section or the non-smoking section. And I would know that my friends and colleagues would want to smoke afterwards. And even though that smoke after lunch would bring me a little cough and it would make my eyes run, even still, I would choose to sit in the smoking area just so we could all be together and be comfortable. Yes, I was a tolerant non-smoker. Now, there were people in our organization who wanted to change things, and one of those people was Lydia. One day, Lydia came to my office and she said, Wendy, you know, Wendy, I'm allergic to smoke. It bothers me. It hurts my throat. It makes my eyes water. And I'm just wondering if we could have, and you know, it causes cancer too. And I'm just wondering if we could have a no smoking policy in this office. Well, now that was a revolutionary idea, and so revolutionary that I had to think about it for a day. So when Lydia came back, though, I was ready with my response. I had done an environmental scan like any good manager would. I said, Lydia, you know, you've got some good points. I don't like smoking that much either. And, you know, I have a burn on the back of my nice green dress from where somebody dropped a cigarette ash on it when we were dancing on New Year's Eve. So I don't really like smoking either. But, you know, if you look around, we have clients who come in here and those clients are very, very nervous. They're very anxious when they come in. And some of them are smokers. And you know, we can't ask them not to smoke when they're in that kind of shape. And you know, if you think about our volunteers, just think of Len. Len does so much of the technical work around here. He fixes our machines. He does all the things that we need to do, the little niggling things that we can't do ourselves and can't afford to do. And you know how Len smokes, and you know how upset he gets when we cross him. I don't think that we could get Len not to smoke in this office. And then there's Dot, who Dot does so much volunteer work, both for the clients and for the staff. And she puts on the tea every Thursday. And Dot just smokes like a chimney, as you know. And you have tried before to convince Dot to do something she didn't want to do. And you know what a miserable experience that is. I don't think, really. Just think of what it would be like to try to get Dot not to smoke. And what's more, we were the CNIB at the time. We sell cigarettes in the hospitals, you know, and we make that's how we make money. That's how we employ blind people, by selling cigarettes in the hospitals. How would it look if we were selling them in the hospitals and we weren't smoking in this office? But I saved the best for last, in case she wasn't convinced. I said, Lydia, think first thing in the morning when we come in here, what do we smell? We smell the pipe smoke of the senior managers who get to work early and they already start smoking. Lydia, I said, I don't think that we can have a policy of no smoking in this office. You could maybe, if you want, you could make a policy in your office of no smoking. And then if you had clients who wanted to smoke, you could take them to the boardroom or some other room where they could smoke while you deal with them. And then I said the thing that possibly explains how it is that I only got to be a middle manager and am now a storyteller. Even though I would have been hoping really that smoking would be stopped, and even though I might have been powerful enough to put my effort towards making it stop, even though all those things, I looked into the future and I said to Lydia, you know, Lydia, given the evidence, I don't think there'll ever be a time when there'll be no smoking in offices. I must have been sleeping or something, because society was changing all around me. And that big change, that major change of culture and smoking, was very near at hand. And so even though I might have hoped that smoking would be disapproved of in offices, and even though I might have done nothing to push the movement forward, this is sometimes how hope turns out. The world was looking after that for me, and things were going my way, only at the time I didn't know it. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. That was absolutely fantastic. And what a happy ending. The perfect story. Well, as you know, one can start off in one direction, and with growth, there's transformation, and all sorts of exciting things can happen. Here's Gordon again with a personal story about a little tree called How the Sprout Changeth. Gordon?
Thanks so much. I was thinking as Wendy was wrapping up her story that 35 years ago, 4 months, 3 weeks, 2 days, and 4 hours ago, I quit smoking. And I can still tell you exactly when that was, and I miss it every day. So it may be that the world has changed, but I'm still the same person I always was. Once upon a time, I think it was 50, 60, could be 70 years ago. Nobody's exactly sure when or exactly where it happened. But the very nub of the start of this story took place. A bird ate a berry off a tree. And it wasn't an important berry. It was just an ordinary berry. It was one of the 200 some berries and seeds and worms and things that that bird had eaten that day, and it used it for fuel to, well, make eggs and chase other birds and keep warm, look for more food. The next day, that bird, flying across the field, did what birds often do. It shat out that seed out of the back of it, and the seed landed in the furrow in the field, and the seed did exactly what seeds do. It put down its root, put up a stem, started to create some seed, some leaves on the stem. And it took a little bit of moisture and a little bit of that bird shit. Yeah, that helped out too. Some nutrient and some sunlight. And it did what we don't know how plants do, but we know that they do it. It transformed all those elements and made it into wood. And it was probably there for, I don't know, almost a year. And the nurseryman who owned that field was walking across the field, and he came across this little sprout coming up in the field. And he stopped and he looked at it. What are you? Kind of pretty. I think I'll take that. And so he went back, he got himself a shovel and a bucket, and he dug it up and he took it in and he put it in what he called the holding bed. Stuff he didn't quite know what it was, but it was interesting, and he'd hang on to it till he knew what it was, if it was useful or not. Well, that little seedling sat in the holding bed for, must have been 7, 8 years, and it did exactly what it was supposed to do. Grabbed a little bit of light, a little bit of moisture, a few nutrients out of the soil, and every year it added another ring to that stem so that it started to get bigger, a little more girth every year, and it grew taller. In that 7, 8 years, it was probably up 6, 7 feet. 2 main leaders coming up. Well, the nurseryman one day got a telephone call from a developer in Calgary here, and the developer said, I got a new subdivision going into North Calgary, and I'm going to need a bunch of trees and bushes because the architect says that I'm supposed to have 2 trees and 4 bushes for every house, and I've got 200 houses. Can you help me out? Well, sure. Come around on Thursday and we'll have a look. Got lots of things. So they went around with a clipboard and they marked down everything that was to be included in the subdivision, and they came to the holding bed, and the developer looked at the little tree and said, what's that? Well, said the nurseman, I'm not exactly sure what it is. I'm thinking mulberry. All right, mulberry it is, and he wrote it down. And about a week later, a tree spade came and took up the little tree. They wrapped it in burlap, put it on a flatbed, took it into Calgary, dropped it and another tree and some bushes in the yard. And that's how it got to be planted in the front yard of a house. The people who'd bought the house were a young couple on their way up, and they were there about 5 years. Every summer they watered the grass and they fertilized the lawn, and the tree just did what it did. It took things and made itself bigger, and it grew. So that at the end of their time, well, we're talking about a tree about 10, 12 feet tall. A new young couple bought the house. They didn't have any kids, but they were just getting started. And when the first baby was born, well, they put him out in the pram out underneath the tree in the leaves, in the shade. And then when his sister came along, well, the two of them, they would play in the shadow of that tree. And then when those kids got a little bit bigger, well, they set up their lemonade stand right in the shadow of that tree because it was a nice place to be, until they learned that you sell more lemonade if you move out of the middle of the yard up onto the sidewalk where everybody can see you. And when the boy, the oldest, was, I guess he must have been about 14, we think he probably took his first kiss underneath that tree. Well, neighbor walking by the house one day said to the fellow who lived in the house, say, Charles, been watching your tree growing there. The one side of it, the leaves are curling up and looking pretty shabby. I think that side of your tree's got to come down. Well, Charles talked to his wife, and his wife said, no, We can't take that tree down. That's where our babies played, and that's where kids had the lemonade stand. And well, she thought maybe James had had his first kiss out there too, but she wasn't exactly sure. But when it comes down to a tree falling on a $40,000 car or preserving the tree, well, the tree went. So the neighbor coming by said, "See, you cut the tree down. What are you going to do with the wood?" "Well, I don't know. Thought I might break it up and burn it." "Oh, well, if you give me some of the wood, I'll promise you a bowl if I can get anything out of it." "Oh, I don't care. Take the whole log if you want." So the neighbor, in fact, did take the tree home and made himself a bowl. And this may be the bowl that ends up on their mantelpiece. Why do I tell you that story? I tell you that story because change and transformation is at the very root of the world we live in. You know, 14.6 billion years ago, there was one blinding flash, and everything that we can see and a lot of stuff we can't see was created. The carbon in your body, the iron in your car, the lead in your battery, all these things have come out of the hearts of stars, where energy was transformed into matter and became planets, became a universe. If you should ever lose heart, if you should ever get to that point where you're saying, nothing will ever change, everything changes. Everything transforms. That's the nature of where we live. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. That was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. And now we come full circle to the very beginning. Chantal will now tell the Cree creation story. Chantal?
Tanse again, everyone. So this story is, I should call it the recreation story, because we were here before. We're known as the two-leggeds because, of course, we walk around on two legs when we're not flattened by elephants, of course. Now, as we were first created on this planet, there was a spirit called Wasakajak, and Wasakajak was supposed to teach us how to live on the land. He was supposed to teach us how to take care of the earth and the air and the water, and how to take care of the animals, and how to honor and respect each other. But Wasakajak, he is a little bit lazy, and he kind of dropped the ball on that. And so we didn't learn how to live in a good way. And so because we didn't learn how to honor the land and harvest appropriately, we were ripping everything out by the roots. We were taking more than what we needed and just leaving everything that we didn't use everywhere. And so the plants didn't have an opportunity to recover or grow back. And so all of the crops and fields, they just started dying. And there was really not a lot for us to eat. The animals who we were also eating, we didn't honor and respect them. We were hunting them too early in the season, and we weren't giving them a chance to replenish themselves either, just like the plants. And so they ended up almost dying out, to the point where all of the ones that were left ran away from the two-leggeds because they knew we were bad news. The two-leggeds didn't take care of the water or the fish, and they were throwing their garbage in the water, and the water started to run almost black with sickness, and the fish started to die. And then all of the air, because it couldn't be filtered by the plants and it couldn't be helped by the water, that started to get sick too. So it became harder and harder and harder to breathe. And the two-leggeds, when there was very, very little left, there was very little in the way of water, there was very little in the way of food, no animals to be seen anywhere, they of course started fighting over the scraps that were left, and in turn killed each other out. And Creator saw the whole mess of the earth, and thought, whoa, 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 wait a second here. All right, we need a do-over. We need a mulligan, because obviously the first time around with the two-leggeds didn't go very well. And so Creator was looking for Wisakajack and saw him sleeping under a tree and said, oh, it's time. And so it started to rain. Now Wisakajack, he was protected under a tree, and so he didn't really get too wet. So he continued to take his little nap. And as it continued to rain harder, the bank of the river that he was sleeping close to started to get higher and higher and run over his toes. So he pulled his toes up and he continued to try and fight and nap some more. And then that river continued to raise with the waters falling from the sky and hit his knees. Then he woke up with a start and he realized that this rain wasn't going to stop anytime soon, and that all of this water was going to continue to raise and raise and raise because Creator needed a mulligan. And so he thought, okay, well, if the earth is going to flood, we're going to have to rebuild the earth. And I'm not quite sure how to do that. So I'm going to go talk to the beaver, because the beaver is the smartest animal I know. So Wisakajack went to the beaver and he said, Beaver, beaver, there's going to be a flood coming and we're going to have to save any animals that are left, and we're going to have to rebuild the earth after it's done. What should we do? And the beaver thought for a moment, and she thought, and she thought. Then she said, well, let's go talk to the cedar tree. The cedar tree was the oldest living cedar tree on earth. She had seen the rise and fall of so many portions of the earth, and she was so old and wise. She was thousands of years old, and her size was just magnificent. You could drive trucks through her. She was huge, and she also had all of the wisdom from all of her years. And so the beaver went to her and said, Cedar tree, there's a huge flood coming. How are we going to protect the animals, and how are we going to rebuild the earth? And the cedar tree said very graciously, Beaver, you will have to cut me down and hollow me out, and all of the animals that were left will climb inside me, and I will protect them. And then you can rebuild once the flooding is done. And the beaver didn't want to cut the cedar tree down. She said, no, cedar, there has to be another way. And the cedar tree said very graciously again, no, beaver, there's no other way. I've seen this happen before, and I hope not to see it happen again. But I will be back. And so, very carefully, the beaver cut down the cedar tree. The cedar tree was so large that when she finally cracked and fell over, as she hit the ground, the whole earth shook. And all of the animals heard the shaking and felt it in their bones, and so ran from all directions to the cedar tree. And as they got there, they saw Beaver was hollowing out the beautiful cedar tree, and they knew that this was their last chance to be saved. So all of the animals climbed in the beautiful boat that the beaver and the cedar had created, and they waited. As the final animal got in the boat, it began to rain harder and harder and harder, and they watched as all of the rivers burst their banks and spilled onto the land, as the oceans rose over, coated the earth, and linked up and connected to the rivers until the whole earth was coated in water. And as they continued to watch it rain harder and harder, they watched as the land sunk deeper and deeper and deeper into the darkness of the ocean. And then they waited for what seemed like days and nights and days and nights. It seemed like forever. They didn't think it was ever going to stop raining. But then one day, it did. And Wisakajack knew that meant it was time for them to rebuild the earth. But how were they going to do that? I'll go ask the beaver, because again, the beaver's the smartest animal he knew. And so he went to the beaver and he said, Beaver, beaver, it stopped raining. We can rebuild the earth. How are we going to do it? And the beaver said, and she thought for a moment, and she thought for a moment, and she thought for a moment, and she said, well, I suppose someone would have to dive down to the bottom of the ocean and grab some land so we could rebuild. And Wisakajack said, that's a beautiful idea. Who's going to do it? And the beaver said, well, I'm a pretty good swimmer. Let me try. And so the beaver hopped out of the side of the boat. She swam down deeper and deeper and deeper, but she couldn't reach the bottom. There was no way she could hold her breath that long. She came up to the surface and said, Wasakajak, it is so far down, I don't think anyone can reach the bottom. And Wasakajak said, well, it's pretty far down, but I'm sure the biggest animals might be able to reach the bottom because they're so big. Maybe they'll displace some of the water and they'll get to the bottom. And so he asked the larger animals in the boat, who can reach the bottom? Who can swim and reach the bottom? And the moose said, well, I can try. I'm quite a good swimmer, and I can always reach the bottom of lakes. Let me try. And so she dove down deeper and deeper and deeper, but of course she couldn't reach the bottom. So she swam up to the surface and said, Wasakajak, it is so far down, I could not hold my breath that long, and I don't think anyone could reach the bottom. I couldn't even see it. And so she got back in the boat. And the bear, who was always quite proud of himself, was like, well, I could try. I'm a pretty great swimmer. So he dove out of the boat. But unfortunately, it was shortly after hibernation season, so he'd put on a lot of weight. And so he just kind of bobbed in the water a little bit, and all of the animals said, oh, bear, get back in the boat. This is unbearable to watch. And so he climbed back into the boat. And then Wasakajak said, well, what about the best divers? If you guys can fly so high, you can dive so deep. So perhaps the divers could do it. Well, the eagle, who could soar the highest, said, well, I will try. And so the eagle soared high, high, high into the sky and reached the highest point than he'd ever reached before, dove straight down into the water, but could not reach the bottom. And then the kingfisher, who is probably the most efficient diver of any of the birds, most of the animals actually, was saying, well, maybe I could reach the bottom. I'm a fantastic swimmer, a fantastic diver. Let me try. And so the kingfisher flew the highest that he had ever flown before, took the deepest breath when he reached that highest point, and dove straight down into the water, cutting it like a knife. And he used his wings to push down deeper and deeper and deeper. But unfortunately, he couldn't reach the bottom either. He swam up to the top and said, Wasakajak, it is so far down, I don't think anyone will be able to reach the bottom. And then Wasakajak asked the best swimmers, well, you guys are the most wonderful swimmers. Beaver had already tried. Who else is a wonderful swimmer who can hold their breath for a really long time? And the turtle said, well, I can hold my breath for a very long time. And I'm a great swimmer, so let me try. And so she dove out of the side of the boat, and the turtle dove down deeper and deeper and deeper. But the deeper she got, the harder the pressure on her shell became, and it started to crack. As she swam up to the surface and she pulled herself back into the boat, all of the animals looked at her shell, which had cracked into 13 pieces, with 28 tiny cracks along the edges, which is now what we see in the turtle shell. And she said, Wasakajak, it is so far down, I don't think anyone can reach the bottom. And then the fastest swimmer said, well, we could probably reach the bottom. And so the fastest swimmer of them all, who also has the most fun, the otter, jumped out of the boat, and he dove down deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, but he couldn't reach the bottom. He came back up to the top and said, Wasakajak, it's so far down, there's no way anybody could reach the bottom. I couldn't reach the bottom. There's no way anybody could reach the bottom. And climbed back into the boat. All of the animals were feeling without hope. They had waited so long for the rain to stop, and now that it had, they couldn't even rebuild the earth because they had no earth to rebuild. And all of them were feeling overwhelmed and saddened. And then there was a tiny voice from inside the boat that said, I can do it. And they all looked around and they said, who said that? And again they heard the voice, I can do it. And they looked around and they said again, who said that? And then the tiny little muskrat came through the crowd of animals, stood up on her hind legs, puffed out her chest very proudly, and said, I can do it. And all of the animals just started erupting in laughter. All of the great, large animals said, Muskrat, you're so tiny and puny. How are you supposed to reach the bottom? We couldn't reach the bottom. All of the divers started laughing at her, saying, Muskrat, you're not a good diver at all. How are you supposed to reach the bottom if we couldn't reach the bottom? The best swimmers started laughing at her, saying, Oh, Muskrat, there is no way you could reach the bottom. We couldn't hold our breath that long. How are you supposed to reach the bottom? And then all of the fastest swimmers started laughing at her. Muskrat, you're so slow. There's no way you can reach the bottom. We can reach the bottom. How are you supposed to reach the bottom? And so as all of the animals were laughing at her, she ignored it, and she stood on the side of the boat and very proudly exclaimed, I can do it. She took the deepest breath that she'd ever taken in her life, and she dove straight into the water. As she dove down deeper and deeper and deeper, all of the animals realized Muskrat was gone. Muskrat had left the boat, and they watched over the side to watch her disappear into the darkness. And then they waited. And they waited for her to come back, but she didn't. And then they began to worry. As it got longer and longer, they knew that there was no way that Muskrat could have held her breath that long. As they watched over the side of the boat, they saw a single bubble of air float to the surface. And they knew that that was Muskrat's very last breath. And they started to cry. They cried and they cried and they cried so hard that they turned all of the ocean salty. They said, Muskrat, Muskrat, why would you do that? Why would you give up your life? And we can't even rebuild the earth. And then Wasakajak continued to watch over the side of the boat for any form of hope. And as he watched, he saw a tiny silhouette floating out of the darkness. As that shadow got closer and closer and closer to the boat, he realized that was Muskrat's lifeless body. And so as she got close, he reached in with all his might, and he held her close to his heart, and he began to cry. He cried and he cried and he cried so hard that he wiped all of the color off Muskrat's belly. All of the animals were so sad that Muskrat had given her life for them. And as everyone was crying and wondering what to do, and they felt without hope and they had lost their friend, Muskrat's tiny little paw flopped open. And in the palm of her hand was a little ball of earth. Muskrat had done it. She had reached the bottom with her last breath and brought it back with her for her friends so they could rebuild the earth. All of the animals were so overjoyed that they could rebuild the earth, but so sad that they had lost such a good friend in Muskrat. It was a very strange feeling to be so sad, but so happy at the same time. And Wasakajak took that ball of earth and said, well, who will carry this ball of earth on their back? The turtle said, I will carry the earth on my back, and climbed into the water. And as she did, Wasakajak took that ball of earth, and he rolled it in a circle. As he rolled it, it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and it got heavier and heavier and heavier until it pushed Turtle beneath the waves, and until it branched out so much that it created all the land we now see all over the world, which is why we call our Earth Turtle Island. And Wasakajak knew he had to get to work, so he asked all of the animals to leave the beautiful cedar boat and go to their place on the earth. And then he took a deep breath to the east, and as he did, Grandfather Sun came out from behind the clouds. A huge rainbow of hope shot across the sky. And as Grandfather Sun warmed the earth, all of the little plants started to grow back. They just started to sprout everywhere. All of the beautiful animals, their bellies became full and pregnant with the babies. And then Wasakajak took a deep breath to the south, and as he did, the earth began to rumble. It began to shake. Huge mountains started shooting up and reaching into the sky. Huge hills started rolling across the prairies. Beautiful landscapes started to develop. Deserts started to develop, and beautiful valleys formed. Wasakajak took another deep breath, and he blew again to the west, and as he did, Grandmother Moon came out, and she shone with all her might, and she pushed with all of her love, and all of the waters washed over Turtle Island. As she pulled, all of the waters receded. She pushed again, and the waters rushed forward. She pulled back, and the waters receded, and as she did, she pushed the tides in and out, in and out. This is why Mother Moon controls the tides. And then all of the different lakes and valleys and streams and rivers all began to form all over Turtle Island. Then Wasakajak took another deep breath to the north, and as he did, the winds began to spin. All of the earth began to spin. It started to spin faster and faster and faster. Grandmother Moon and Grandfather Sun started to push and pull and push and pull with all of their might to slow the beautiful earth down. And as they did, they created the days and the nights, the weeks and the months, and the seasons and the years, the decades and beyond. And all of the winds, as they spun all over Turtle Island, the plants and the animals took a breath for their very first time and were gifted a sacred breath, which was a breath of wisdom that we all share. And we've been sharing that same breath with our ancestors for many, many years. And then Wasakajak took that beautiful muskrat and blew into her that breath. And Muskrat took her sacred breath. She came back to life, and she was so thankful and humbled for Wasakajak to give her her gift of life. Wasakajak was so thankful, as were all of the other animals, for having the ability to rebuild the earth, for Muskrat's sacrifice of her own life for the betterment of everyone. And to this day, the muskrat symbolizes hope, and she symbolizes sacrifice for the greater good. And that is the Cree creation story. And to go with that story, I'm going to share with you the creator song. So this Cree creator song is, it was gifted to me from a friend of mine. She actually shared it with me. And for some reason, when I first heard the song, it just stuck with me. And when songs are meant for you, they tend to do that. But when I learned it, I was so thankful to have learned it, and I brought it to my great aunt, and I was singing and drumming with her. She's in an extended care facility because she needs a little bit of extra help with her health. But as I was drumming and singing this song with to her, she started to sing along with me. And after I was done, I was like, Auntie, how do you know this song? She's like, how do you know this song? This is our family song. Where did you find it? We thought it was lost. And so it goes to show that when you're on the right path, good things come to you. When you're reclaiming your culture, reclaiming who you are, and finding your path in the world, the things that are meant for you to carry, you will. And so, this is the Cree creator song, which honors all life. In Cree, we always say all my relations, because we're all related. all my relations.
Thank you so much, Chantal, for sharing your gifts tonight. That was just wonderful. And now we come to the end of our journey for the moment. I would like to thank our tellers, Chantal, Wendy, Maria, Gordon, and our wonderful musician and tech person, Doreen. A special thanks to Wendy for support and mentorship along the way. We would also like to thank many wonderful volunteers who helped this cafe come to fruition, including June and Mediha. We also thank our sponsor, the Alberta Foundation for the Arts, who gives us a much appreciated arts presenting grant, which covers a portion of our costs. We are very grateful to you, our audience, for your generous donations and support for this event. It's been wonderful to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. Please now join us in singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow as we close. Please remain muted though, as you do so, so that Zoom does not have a nervous breakdown. Ladies and gentlemen, Somewhere Over the Rainbow.
All right, so this is where you get to join in too. Wherever you are, you can raise your voice in hope with this beautiful song. I hope you join us. And I just want to say too, what a beautiful variety of stories and Chantal's music. It was just so rich, it fills your heart. All right, here is Over the Rainbow. Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me. Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly. Birds fly over the rainbow. Why then, oh, why can't I? If happy little bluebirds fly beyond the rainbow, why, oh, why can't I?
Thank you so much, Doreen. That was just beautiful. And now I'd like to invite all audience members to unmute and turn off on their video feeds if they wish, and show appreciation and join in the show. See you soon.
Awesome, everybody. Fantastic.
Oh, it's so nice to see everybody.
I just want to give a special shout out while everybody is showing their appreciation in whatever way you wish. A very special thanks from all of us to Anne. Anne conceived of this show, obviously inspired by Wendy, but it was her concept to do this Story Cafe. She directed it, she hosted it, she performed in it, and she is the treasurer for this event. So the amazing Anne Cowling, please, a big hand.
Bravo, Anne. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Bravo, Anne.
Thank you so much. I'm just looking at all the faces here. Thank you so much.
Hey, Mary, good to see you.
Very kind. Thank you.